Hold on to your butts.
Don't move, you're surrounded by armed bastards.
What are we going to do?
Well, I say let's get out there and twat it.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Cabin Night Podcast. I'm James.
I'm Rob.
And I'm Jake.
And today we're going to be talking about the broad subject of British sitcoms. However, before we do, all I'm going to say is grab a drink, make yourself comfortable and enjoy the discussion. So, one thing that unites us, again, other than horror music, other than horror films, music and films and other things that we're discussing, is sitcoms, British sitcoms specifically. So we'll talk about our favourites in a little bit, but let's go for a bit of a broad topic first. Other than the setting, which to be fair is not always in Britain, you know, for example, Red Dwarf is set in space, what is it that makes a British sitcom quintessentially British to you? What do you think is it about them that makes it a British sitcom?
Usually, not in the literal meaning, but usually it's a family of some sort, whether it's a work family or it's the group of people are close for wanting to be close as much as anything else. Like Red Dwarf, they've got no choice but to be close with each other, and they take the mick out of each other and all sorts. But I ain't got brothers or sisters, but I'm sure you do that with your brothers and sisters anyway. So it's still I see it as a family thing. Not necessarily there's a dad, there's a mum and whatever else, but it's a family as a whole, and British things generally revolve around family.
True, very true.
For me, it's the humour. I think the humour, if you look at British sitcoms versus American sitcoms, and I'm not at all ragging on American sitcoms because I think, you know, specific ones have the place. You know,
We shall get onto American
which
sitcoms.
we shall get onto. But if you look at the sort of the direct difference between the two, I don't want to say British ones are wittier, but it's about the words they're saying and the jokes they're making, whereas in American it tends to be a bit more about it's a bit more brash, it's a bit more forceful humour.
I completely agree.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
There's a witticism to British humour, and which is why British humour as an idea is a thing. Johnny Depp, who is American, says that he absolutely loves British humour, and that's what he tries to portray in his movies. So I think it's the humour used that makes it quintessentially British.
So, who do you think is, and there's no right or wrong answer to this obviously, but who do you think is the king or queen of British sitcoms? Whether it be a writer, an actor, a producer, who do you think is sort of the quintessential, yes, they represent British sitcoms in all its glory?
That's a tough one, because I had instantly about 5 or 6 names whiz through my head there.
You will do, which I think again speaks for how strong the pool is.
Yeah, I mean, John Sullivan,
I don't mind.
Ben Elton,
Yeah, I'll do it. Ben Elton, yeah.
Richard Curtis.
Richard Curtis. So I say John Lloyd because he produced a lot of these things.
Yeah.
He's the one who's got an eye for a lot of these things.
I don't think I could pick one of those. If I had to, maybe I'm at my back, I'd probably say John Sullivan.
Okay.
I just think the only thing I think about John Sullivan is like I've seen loads of things recently where people are watching it for the first time. I mean, I know we're in the cancel culture now and all that sort of thing, but people are saying that it's racist and sexist and everything, which I get.
It has got those elements.
It has got the elements, but I don't think it's. To me, I still love Fools and Horses, and I don't think, again, much like we've said before, and we'll probably talk about it in its own episode. You know, can you separate the art from the artist, kind of thing? Nothing will stop me liking Fools and Horses. They've never made as far as I can tell, a serious racist or sexist faux pas. There are lots of elements which are like, ooh, that's a little bit close. But
Data terminology, I think, is the worst you get. They use the term, I'm not going to say it, but they use a derogatory term for a Pakistani person.
Yeah.
They do, yeah.
They use quite a few homophobic, what we consider homophobic slurs today. Yeah.
But not that we're excusing, but at the time it was acceptable. We're not excusing what they said.
The only thing
but it was
I think,
time.
certainly with Fools and Horses, is Del Boy thinks he's clever, but he's not. He uses French terms wrong, and so that's how it gets. All right, the writers have put that in, but that's how he's using it almost, and he thinks it's in the correct term, and it's clearly not the correct term. So I think that one is for me is a little bit of a grey area, but I think John Sullivan.
I think the instances of those uses of those types of that sort of terminology is quite low in comparison to the vast
Yeah.
majority of things that happen in those episodes.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah.
So along the same lines, not a producer or writer or anything, but I'd say David Jason. Obviously played Del Boy in Fools and Horses, but has been in so many sitcoms.
Yeah.
He was in that. He was in Open All Hours. Was in Porridge.
Last of the Summer.
Last Summer.
No,
it wasn't.
Darling Woods and Me.
Darling Was a Mate, which isn't a sitcom, but yeah, but it's good. I'd say David Jason because he can show the full range of a sitcom because it's situation comedy, so he can do the comedy, whether it be him mucking up his French, falling through the bar. He can do that, but it can also do the situational stuff. Like everything with Raquel, it's quite heartwarming. Some of the stuff with Raquel, the way he views his family is very real, and I think that's why he brings through that element.
Every man.
Yeah. Fools and Horses specifically has stood the test of time because even though some of the language is a bit dated now and some of the references are a bit dated, everyone can still see their family in these 3-4 people. They still can see that, and I think David Jason's the linchpin on bringing all that together. So that was a nice quick discussion actually. I thought it was going to take a bit longer than that. So taking the greats out of the equation, like Fools and Horses, like Fawlty Towers, like Blackadder, what would you say is one of the best British sitcoms that either people may have forgotten about or people haven't heard of? I've got a few written down that I think people either have never heard of or have forgotten about as time has gone on.
These are the ones that we maybe mentioned.
Yeah, we talked about this briefly last night. Yeah. So what would you say is one that you would go, oh yeah, you've heard of Fools and Horses, you've watched Porridge, but give this a go as well. This is really good.
One that I used to watch a lot with my mum, mainly because my mum is not from Liverpool, but a family is from Liverpool, was Bread.
Oh yeah.
Used to watch that a lot, and they're all sat down because it seemed that almost every scene was in their kitchen, around that kitchen table, and it's got what's his name? The guy that played the security guard in Trolley. He's in it. Ian. Mark Caddiwatt Butcher.
He went, that's right. And now I'm thinking of him as security guard in Full Monty.
Yeah.
Yes, he is.
Yeah. I think Bread, I love Bottom and Young Ones, and Filthy Rich and Cat Flap, all the ones that Rick and Aid did. Most of them were Ben Elton as well, to be fair.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, Ben Elton, he had a lot of them.
I think Bread is probably one where people either don't know it exists or it's just passed them by.
That's what I mean. It's one that's kind of been forgotten about as time has gone on. Yeah. Like one I'd pick is Ever Decreasing Circles, which I still think is hilarious. I mean, it finished in the 80s, but I still think it's hilarious. It's still got some really funny moments. And Peter Egan is the next door neighbour Paul. He's got some of the funniest lines, and it still has me in stitches.
Right, Terry and June, that was another one.
That was another one that's kind of been forgotten about as time's gone on. What about you, Jake?
Mine are more modern. I've not got anything earlier than the 90s. I don't think I have. First one being rather modern, actually. Outnumbered. Outnumbered. I think obviously it had its popularity when it was on. I remember when it was on its initial run on TV. But it's one of them for me. I've enjoyed it even more recently with the parental side of it, the side of appreciating what Hugh Dennis and what's she called, the actress, her mom.
Oh, come on, what's she
Karen.
called?
No, Karen's the daughter, isn't she?
I don't know since I watched
but
it.
It's got Outnumbered's got one of my most favourite quotes from a sitcom ever, and that's when the little girl Karen is asking if she can watch a horror film, and Hugh Dennis says, "No, we're not going to allow you to watch another horror film. Do you remember when you watched The Hills of Eyes and you was terrified? And we went down on that holiday to Gloucester and you were convinced the Cotswolds were watching you." The other one I would mention, and I'd probably put this one above it in terms of my own taste, what I enjoyed it a lot more, and that's Goodnight Sweetheart. That's obviously that nice link into Only Fools and Horses with it being Nicholas Lyndhurst.
It was such a departure.
Yeah. His posh accent always got me in that.
Yeah, it's close to his true accent in there. Yeah.
Because although Rodney is clever, Rodney isn't stupid.
He's dopey, isn't he?
He's just not street smart, is he? Like he's a bit. He's
got the academic smarts, but not the
he's a bit doing that way. And obviously, what's his name of his character?
Gary Sparrow.
Gary, that's it.
Gary Sparrow.
Oh, also the security guard from Trolley and Bread is in it. It's his best mate. It's
Oh, Ron!
Oh, Ron!
Victor Maguire.
Yes.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
You saw it.
Yeah. It really threw me, and I remember getting fed up with it really quickly though. When they swapped from, it was Derv the Derwin at the beginning.
Yeah, Derv the Kerwin and
Kerwin. That's it.
Phoebe. No, Phoebe's the
Okay.
character name.
Yeah, they swapped both wives.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I think.
Yvonne.
Yeah, Von and Phoebe, they swapped the actresses that played. Well, not swapped them instead, but they both got replaced by other actresses.
And I didn't like it once that swap had happened.
Okay, so
I think I preferred the first Yvonne, but I preferred the second Phoebe.
other way around. Other way around, I preferred the first Phoebe, but second Yvonne.
I was wanted to find a pub where you could do that. Just walk through a door and end up somewhere else.
To be fair, some pubs in the East End do look like
So
that.
we went, didn't we?
We went to the actual pub,
we
yeah.
We walked down. Is it
Ducky's Passage, yeah.
Passage. We walked down it to the Royal Oak pub where it was filmed.
It was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. So Goodnight Sweetheart's actually on my. It's one of my top 5 sitcoms.
Right.
Goodnight Sweetheart. I think it's amazing. But the other two I'm going to quickly mention that I think they're more recent ones that people may have not discovered yet or not found. One called Detectorists, which is Mackenzie Crook. Yeah, you've seen it. Toby Jones, Mackenzie Crook, basically playing a metal detectorists and their adventures together. But it's really, really sweet. It's really gentle. It's got one of my happiest memories from Bloodstock. Weirdly, has something to do with detectorists. We were in the queue to go in. You know, everyone's obviously playing music and stuff. They were going through a bit of Testament, a bit of Lamb of God, a bit of Napalm Death, and then suddenly the intro theme to the Detectorists came on, which is a really kind of doom 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 doom, really nice little twiddly guitar, and I went, "Is that a theme to Detectorists?" And I went, "Yeah, it is. And then from over the side of the queue, said, "Someone say Detectorists? You mean say Detectorists?" And
like meerkats popping up.
Yeah, this entire queue suddenly got talking about Detectorists. So apparently Detectorists is really big in the metalhead community. Who knew? And the other one I'm going to talk is Ghosts, which is a more recent one, which is done by the same guys who did Horrible Histories on CBBC, who I think collectively call themselves the Six Idiots. But it's really funny. It's basically like, remember Rent-A-Ghost from the 80s? It's a bit like that. I'd highly recommend it. I think Series 3 is only just finished on BBC now. It's just stupid. It's really silly. Quite sweet at times as well. Quite sweet. But as a modern British sitcom, I think it kind of encapsulates all the true elements of it and sort of breaking it down to modern British sensibilities. I think is.
I really like Modern Family. Not Modern Family. My Family.
My Family, yeah.
I like the early series of My Family. It kind of peters out towards the end.
Yeah. I get that.
But yeah. So, kind of touched on briefly earlier, how do you think British sitcoms differ from American sitcoms? What do you think? What do you think really kind of separates them more? What do you think kind of separates the two genres?
In the genetic makeup of a sitcom, they don't really. You've got a group of friends or a family group that use several noticeable locations. So, to use a comparison, if you look at How I Met Your Mother and Only Fools and Horses, you've got
One's funny and one's not.
well, that's personal taste. But I'm not comparing the humour. I'm comparing the setting. You've got the apartment, which is where a lot of the action takes place. You've got the Nag's Head and Murphy's Irish Bar, where McLaren's. That's it. Thank you, dear. So in the genetic makeup, I don't think a lot differs. You've always got that location plus people, and whether they're friends or family, whatever. In terms of the humour, and I think this is where the biggest difference is, and I absolutely do think that the American sitcoms have the place, and I think we should consider them to be two separate beasts. We shouldn't compare them. We shouldn't compare them or even say one's better than the other, because that's down to taste. By all means, have the one that you prefer, but they are two different beasts. You've got one which is, as I said earlier, it's British humour, and it's wordy and it's clever and it's witty and tight, whereas the other one, it's more slapstick in places. It's more brash. It's maybe a bit more toilet humour.
I wouldn't say it's toilet humour. I get what you're saying. It's brash. The best description I've ever heard of it was actually, I think it was by Stephen Fry. He said the best way to describe the difference between American sitcoms and British sitcoms is British sitcoms kind of dance around the joke. They'll make wordplay. They'll do things like they'll kind of hint at the joke. Whereas the American sitcoms kind of go, "Hello, joke's here. Look at the joke. Look at the joke. Look at the joke. Isn't this funny? This is a really funny joke, isn't it? Look at the joke. Look at the joke. Look at the joke."
They force the point, don't they? I suppose.
Yeah, but that could be down to me. For me, it could be down to the fact that a British sitcom will be 6 episodes a series. An American sitcom is 20 odd episodes a series. So it's a long time to try and get those, especially trying to go for so many jokes a minute or so many jokes an episode. That's a lot to hit every year.
See, I find it really weird because although I absolutely love Friends, which is at its heart a sitcom, I don't class the American stuff as sitcoms. It's just a comedy show.
But they are in the definition of a situation. They are
They
situational
are, yes,
comedies.
They are. They are legally by definition, I suppose. They are in that. But I wouldn't say that Fools and Horses is a comedy show. Fools and Horses is a sitcom. That's what it is. Whereas the American stuff is just a comedy show. I don't see them. Do you know what I mean? That's kind of how I separate it. So I don't compare them in that respect because they're not the same type of show. One is a situational comedy show, and one's just a comedy show. It's very really.
If you look at it for their audience, though, and I think, and again, it's going to sound quite insulting to put it this way, and I certainly don't mean it in that way. However, for the most part, a British sitcom will make comedy for British people.
Yes.
Whereas American sitcoms make the comedy that American people appreciate more. Now, it sounds like an insult when I say British people get the American style of comedy, but I think the witty, droll British, sort of quaint British terminology used in a lot of British sitcoms might be lost on some American viewers.
Again, the way I'm going to describe this sounds like I'm insulting them, and I am to some extent. But a lot of American sitcoms, because America is, it's rather big. There's a lot of people over there, so there's a larger demographic to aim for. There's a lot more people to try and please. Like over here, if a sitcom gets 2 million viewers, that's amazing. That's brilliant. In America, if a sitcom gets 2 million viewers, it's almost classed as a failure.
Yeah, it's straight away.
So to trying to get as many viewers as possible, and again, this term is quite derogatory, but you see what I mean. It's almost like appealing to the lowest common denominator. They're going for the baseline wherever they can to try and appeal to as many people as possible. They'll go for the easy laugh that will get more people on board rather than a more clever,
witty, well-built, well-crafted joke.
Which is why I think I stand by a statement to this day. The last good American sitcom to me is Frasier. Frasier to me, I can still watch for most of all 11 seasons. It just, again, like most series, American or otherwise, just kind of peter off towards the end. But I can watch them and they're still clever, they're still funny, they still make me laugh. That's how you know a sitcom's good, if you can repeatedly watch it and laugh at the same points. Because some sitcoms you'll watch and laugh your head off the first couple of times you watch it, but then you'll watch it again and kind of go,
I think it's an anomaly though, Fraser, in the sense that it is a very clever comedy.
Oh, it is. If you compare it to its contemporary at the time, which would have been Friends, as the other big American sitcom, it is a completely different show to Friends. Yeah. Completely different show.
But also, as well, I think due to the fact that they are almost well-spoken, they're almost British.
Yeah, I think that's what I've
They're almost...
I agree. It's got that element, you've got the very intelligent person of Frasier.
The opera. They do very...
There's a lot more wordplay in Frasier than there is anything else.
And that's why it's an anomaly amongst the British sitcom, the American sitcom.
I think Martin is like the standard American sitcom guy.
Yeah.
Plonked into the British sitcom.
Yeah, you kind of get the wordplay stuff with Frasier, you get the slapstick stuff with Niles, and then you get sort of, again, for lack of a better term, the generic American sitcom stuff with Martin. Yeah. Frasier, I think, is amazing. I still think it's brilliant. To this day, I think it's amazing. But it's kind of leads nicely onto the next point of, okay, because we were talking about British and Americans, British sitcoms that have been remade for the American market, or attempted to be remade for the American market. 9 times out of 10, fail miserably. Fawlty Towers being the most famous one, where they didn't get it, so they tried to cut out Basil Fawlty. Most famously, they didn't understand it. Yeah, they made it. I can't remember what they called it, but they tried basically. It didn't work, so they went, right, we're going to try it again without Basil. It was like, what? You do realise that is most of the joke is Basil. Red Dwarf, famously, the pilot didn't work. It is pretty poor.
Even by putting Crichton in it, it still didn't work.
Well, I love the story that they filmed the pilot for Red Dwarf, which actually, nice little segue. Daphne from Frasier is Holly in the American pilot. They filmed the pilot for the American version of Red Dwarf, and it didn't quite work. And apparently they wrote to Chris Barry going, "We can't find an American actor with enough self-loathing to be Rimmer. Can you please come over and do it?" So the American version of Red Dwarf didn't work. The American version of IT Crowd didn't work. It was called Big Bang Theory. No, but yeah, the actual... Again, they got Richard Ayoade to go over and do the American version of IT Crowd, and it just didn't work.
To my mind, the only one I can recall that's actually gone over there, and possibly, depending on who you speak... I mean, it's not for me. I don't like the show, either American or British. But the American Office...
Yeah, no,
that's supremely popular.
That's probably the exception to the rule, actually.
Yeah.
And
And probably surpassed.
Yeah, more so than...
I can't watch the British Office, but the American Office, I'll kind of go, this isn't bad, actually.
Yeah,
there's
we
little
started
bits I've
watching
watched.
it, and neither were for us, but the popularity of one over the other is
Out of
undeniable.
the Ricky Gervais stuff, I preferred Extras.
So I wasn't a fan of Extras.
The only Ricky Gervais thing that I actually like is Afterlife.
Yeah.
I just can't stand Ricky Gervais. It's the reason I didn't watch Stardust for years, because he was in it.
Even though it was such a small...
It was enough, though. It was
such a good film.
It is, yeah, now I've watched it, yeah, it's a good film. So do you think there's something, again, going back to what I said about quintessentially British, do you think there's something that just can't be translated? Even if you take all the characters and put them in, just move them to America, there's just something that doesn't work. It loses a certain element, it loses a certain facet.
I suppose it's going back to what I said earlier about they play to their audience, and they play to what their audience wants to see. And for Chris Barry and Craig Charles and Danny John Jules to go across there and do what they did here, of course it'll be lost in translation, because it's not that... There must be somebody in America that gets it, because why else would they want an American version of it? But yeah, they're absolutely lost in translation. I don't think you could get... I mean, really, if you think about it, you hear more about our sitcoms going across there and failing. You don't hear about any of their stuff coming across.
I'm sure there is.
Well,
I just can't think.
because I'm pretty sure we've had a similar sort of conversation on this recently. And if you think about it, we probably do have some, because if you think about things such as Geordie Shore and The Only Way is Essex, they're classed as reality shows, even though they're not.
Yeah.
They're absolutely scripted.
Scripted reality, I think they're called now,
Absolutely
yeah.
scripted. Therefore, and that's a very American, if you like Keeping Up with the Kardashians and the sort of the way that their celebrities are idolised in a different way to ours. I think the nearest approximation we could probably get to an American show coming over here is your Geordie Shores and Your Only Way is Essex and the others.
Of those ilk. Yeah, no,
Real Housewives of Chiswick.
But I think as well, like, I can't imagine... I mean, How I Met Your Mother and Friends are basically the same show, just in a slightly different time frame. And slightly different things, in that they're more... None of them are together in Friends when they start, whereas Lily and Marshall are, and it's about their relationship with the group of friends and how it all... But I can't imagine a British sitcom where it's 5, 6 friends as such. Most of it's families in Britain.
Yeah.
No, you're saying about that family dynamic.
Or you are, or like Red Dwarf or British Empire, for example, you're thrown together as a group of people because you work together. You have no choice but to get on or not. And some of the element of funny is in that. But yeah, so I can't imagine Friends coming over here.
No, I
As
just
much as
don't
I
think...
love Friends,
because we're saying about quintessentially British, that's quintessentially American.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Do you see that as our stuff being better, which is why they want to have an American version, or do you see it as their stuff being dreadful and we don't want it?
I think America does. Obviously, they've got ABC, NBC, they've got 1,000 networks, and they all want to have their own big flagship show.
Yeah.
I think there's too much. And like you said,
Diluted market.
yeah, and like you said, British stuff is generally 6, 10 episodes a season for us, and it's done for that season, and that's it. There's a whole other 10 episodes that are still going for that American season.
And does that translate to filler then?
Yeah, I mean that's not just a problem with sitcoms. There's a problem with, I think, that's it. Which Americans...
American network.
I feel like we've been just bashing America in this episode now or something. But they've started to move away from that a little bit more. more so now that they're more willing to get like Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
When I say everyone's cup of tea, they're more willing to give reduced episodes if he's going to tell a better story. So they seem to be more leaning to more a British way of making television, of kind of, right, well, let's tell a condensed story well, rather than having. I mean, you're always going to, in any series, British or American, you're going to get those episodes of padding. So, yeah, I agree. So there's a lot more filler episodes. Kind of, we've got a block to fill in this time to this time. I think British sitcoms tend to be more willing to take a risk. Like there used to be a not a famous adage, but rather a rule at the BBC, so an unwritten rule or something, that if a sitcom didn't do well in the first series, they would automatically commission a second series to try and get it out quickly and try and see if they can bolster rating. Fools and Horses famously was almost a failure in its first series, so they very quickly commissioned a second series to try and keep people's interest up, and then obviously it built from there. It's possible that it's that we're more willing to take a risk on something, we're more willing to give it a go.
I think as well, like I've just said, like dilute market thing, like the amount of, like, if you just flick through Netflix, the amount of American comedy sitcom type shows that are on there.
Yeah.
There's thousands of them. Like a lot of the British ones have done and finished. There's not many, you know, they only do a few seasons. Like how many seasons did Man Down do? Obviously Rick Mail died, but
I think they did 4 or 5 in the end.
not going out. I mean, that's probably the longest running one at the minute. Lee Max.
At the moment, but I think Peep Show's the record for the most series. Was that 14 series that went for him?
So far,
Which I can't stand Peep Show. I hate Peep Show.
There's only one joke I like from Peep Show. There's only one joke. It's
Super Ants.
Super Ants. The
I
entire.
liked In Between, but I'm too late for it. If I'd have been younger when it came out,
I was never a fan of In-Betweeners.
I enjoyed In Between.
There's a couple of moments I don't mind, but
I can see myself in some of the characters. But if I'd have been a lot younger, I'd have got it a lot more.
Well, that's another one famously In-Betweeners remake in America. Apparently it's atrocious. I've never seen it. Apparently it's absolutely awful. Apparently it's one of the worst things. So we'll quickly move on, as we are running out of time. So, to finish off, what would you say are your top... I'm going to say top 5, but you can do as many as you want. Preferably not 100.
I'll look up.
Top 5 sitcoms that you will sit down and virtually watch beginning to end every time. So what would you say your top 5 sitcoms?
I'm going to reel them off then.
Okay.
So I'm going to go Only Fools and Horses,
Right.
Red Dwarf,
Yeah.
Blackadder, a recent entry to the list, granted, because I never watched it growing up, Fawlty Towers, and Goodnight Sweetheart.
Interesting. We've got three of the same.
Yeah.
3 of the same.
You will notice a person appears quite a few times in mine.
Is it Rick Mail?
It is
Rick
Rick
Mail.
Mail.
Oh, okay.
Only Fools and Horses number one. In fact, I've watched whatever was on Netflix since we've had Elias. I've watched all them, and they took them off now, but I've watched them all.
No, yeah, they have.
I watched all them, Bottom and Young Ones. That were just hilarious to me growing up. All the knob jokes and the slapstick and all that sort of stuff. Emma can't stand it because it's too slapstick. She doesn't.
Hayes doesn't like it either. She can't stand Rick Mail. Yeah.
Red Dwarf. At one point, Red Dwarf would have been second. I think because I kind of got fed up with Bottom because they didn't do any more, and I wanted to see.
Yeah,
more.
It's just those. There's just
Red
those.
Dwarf carried on, and
It's just those 18 episodes. Is it 18 episodes of Bottom? Yeah.
and 12 of Young Ones. 2 seasons of Young Ones. And
How much did they do Filthy Fish and Cat Flap? Was that just one series? Or was that 2?
I don't know actually. Can't remember.
Because that's the kind of one that's been forgotten about.
That was the one that I wasn't as out of them all. There was one that I weren't that bothered about. Number 5.
I mean, you can leave it at 4 if you want, or do you want to try and fill that hole?
No, I'll stick it at 4.
You stick at 4.
They're the ones that I watch
Well, that's right.
pretty much constantly, and I've watched them all recently as well.
So interesting. One that appears in all 3 of our lists is Red Dwarf.
Yeah.
Red Dwarf appears in all our lists because
It's great.
it is just great, especially sort of the golden era of sort of, I'd argue sort of series 3 to 6.
I'd include the first series simply because the first 3 series are my favourite, so I'd go 1 to 6.
But again, series 1 of Red Dwarf didn't do that well, so they
I
automatically.
don't care how well it did. I'm talking about my enjoyment.
The series I didn't like that much was 4.
What was 4?
Always like Dimension Jump
Camille.
and Camille.
Oh yeah, Camille. It was Inquisitor on there as well. Was that
That's
there?
series 5. See, I'd take series 4 over series 5 because series 5 got things like Demons and Angels and Back to Reality. You know, the one when they all wake up and they're playing a video game and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
But series 6, it's got some of my favourite episodes: Gunmen of the Apocalypse, Legion, Sirens, or Sirens as I used to read it as a kid.
The only one I really like is and 4 is the one where they
I quite like Demons and
where they
Angels.
go to the Is it Justice Realm?
Justice World, yeah.
Justice World, where you can't, whatever you do to somebody else, you get it back.
Yeah, that's pretty
And he
cool.
just keeps getting them all them ceramic
Hit me
things.
with this, matey.
I love Angels and Demons because of Rimmer's
That-
quoting it.
yeah.
So, first, I'm going to whip you to within an inch of your life, and then I'm going to have you.
Every series has got its marks, to be fair,
Wonderful
from Red
those,
Dwarf.
yeah.
Apart from Back to Earth, which is pretty dreadful.
Yes.
I
We can all
remember
agree on
watching that. Yeah, I remember. New Red Dwarf, gotta watch
Yeah,
it.
first Red Dwarf in years, yeah.
Oh, did I watch
is this?
this?
But then to counter the next series, series 10,
Yeah.
was really good.
Yeah,
that
it
was
was.
really good.
That one
It was a
where they
moose.
met- Where they met Jesus or that.
Yeah, which Lemons is one of my favourite episodes. I think of all of them, I think it's one of my favourite episodes. It's just so stupid. And then Faulty Towers, another fantastic. Only 12 ever episodes of that, really, really good. Goodnight Sweetheart, like we were saying. Detectorists, I'd highly recommend if you just want a genteel comedy, just really sweet, really kind of just to watch, almost to not concentrate on. I'd recommend Detectorists. League of Gentlemen. I know it's one of them. It's kind of a sitcom with sketch comedy elements thrown in there.
It certainly develops into a sitcom anyway, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's got an arc, therefore.
Every character has an arc. Every character's got a journey. So I'd argue
It's just done in a different way.
yeah, you could just see their roots of sketch comedy. But there's loads of sitcoms we haven't even talked about. Dinner Ladies, Father Ted, The Good Life, Hello Hello, Porridge,
Black Books.
Black
I
Books,
used to love
Open
Father
Hours.
Ted. I remember being very upset when he died.
Yeah, he died not long after filming. Friday Night Dinner is another more recent one that we haven't mentioned. That's when the British sitcom is such a deep well, I think. Because maybe there's only 6 episodes a series, or 8, or however many, it means that it's easier, maybe,
Doesn't
to make high
outstay its
quality.
welcome.
Yeah,
No.
I was going to say, I think it's because they don't do as many episodes. They don't have to put filler in. Every episode is good, and therefore they've covered it quickly in 2, 3, 4 seasons.
And it doesn't have to be every year. You know,
No.
sometimes 2 or 3 years go past without.
Well, look at Fools and Horses.
Well, yeah, especially as it went on. I mean, they stopped even doing normal episodes. They started doing basically films,
Specials.
towards the end. So I think it's that willingness to kind of go, no, take your time, make it work, rather than sort of maybe like take out your big bangs or your things like that. That's like, well, no, it's September. You need to be started doing your next episodes. You know, if we don't care, you got a contract for 10 seasons, so off you pop. So maybe there's that kind of element to it as well.
Did we all pick Fools and Horses as number 1?
No, Fools and Horses wasn't on my list. I like
Oh,
Fools and
you got
Horses.
that right.
It's an honourable mention, Fools and Horses. My number 1 would probably still be Red Dwarf. Although
I was just going to say, if it was on all our lists, Grandad or Albert.
I think I would still choose Albert.
I think
over
I would.
Grandad.
I love Grandad, but I would prefer. I think I prefer Albert.
For me, it's Grandad. I love Grandad.
Grandad's got some of the funny. I like what David Jason said, that for years him and Nicholas Lyndhurst were warm packs for Leonard Pitt, because he would say nothing and then come out with a perler of a line and just kill the audience. My favourite one is still when they're in Spain. He says, "You were gun running during the Spanish Civil War. When's the best time to do it, Del boy?" I was like, he's not wrong.
My favourite one, Grandad's, is I asked for an Emperor burger.
The cheeseburger.
Look at that Sydney Potter.
What's the line in Friday the 14th?
Which one?
Do you like fish?
So there is a man at the window. Did he have a bucket and a chamois leather?
Oh, when they get stopped by the police.
No salmon. Though.
No salmon though. Oh. Yeah, Grandad's got some perlers of lines, but I think as a character, Albert worked better.
Yeah, I think one of my favourite moments from any Only Fools and Horses is one of Albert's, and that's the where Delboy asks him to be shot.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
talking about going out with that girl from Auto Garage.
Yeah. Not yet.
The one, the Albert one for me is where he falls down the cellar. Are you the same Albert Trotter?
Gladstone Trotter. Yeah, it's
That on whatever day fell down the cellar of the nag's head. But oh yeah, okay.
oh no, he's still great.
I could literally watch them back to back.
Well, me and Hay, she's never seen him before, so we're slowly working our way through him. So we've just got to Albert basically joining. So we've just had the episode of him falling down the trapdoor actually. So we've just got there. But yeah, I think that brings us nicely to a close for this episode on British sitcoms. So you've been great. We've been Kevin Knights. A good night.